of the most important things about Commander is the inherent randomness in decks. And as we've seen throughout the years with EDH rec and content creation, we've seen the reduction in randomness with the softness on tutors, the more efficient card draw. Heck, even the most recent podcast episode from Salubrious Snail, 3-3 Elk, and Trinket Mage are talking about that as well. And I would highly recommend you watch that. And it just kind of reminded me why I wanted to do this video today, about the juxtaposition of one of my favorite commanders, one that I've always wanted to build, but I try and minimize the amount of decks that I build. I'm very much the type of person that could be building 100 if I don't control myself. I have my 6 and I'm very picky about where I build them, but this is a top 3 for me. And Mr. House CEO is that juxtaposition of adding randomness, but based on how Magic is designed now, especially with the D&D sets, you kind of remove some of that by increasing your odds. Your odds are just in your favor. Just like in Commander, the chances of you drawing certain cards, yes, you can't confirm your ability to draw a certain mana rock or a tutor every game, but you can increase it to the point where it's very likely every game. And that's where like CDH levels of stuff come in. But that's where I love Mr. House, President and CEO. Legendary artifact creature human, whenever you roll a 4 or higher, create a 3/3 colorless robot artifact creature token. If you rolled 6 or higher, instead create that token and a treasure token. 4 tap, roll a 6-sided dice plus an additional 6-sided dice for each mana from treasure spent to activate this ability. So in this case, if it's a 4 activated ability, you want to be spending 4 treasures at most here, and then you're rolling 4 6-sided dice. But the key is, you don't want to be rolling 6-sided dice. You want to be rolling D10s. D20s. You want to be rolling large dice when it comes to a creature like this. And I think flavorfully so, like it's really cool where, you know, like how thematic this legendary is, especially in terms of lore, being a 0 power creature, being an artifact creature, just a lot of it really comes together. And as a soft introduction to the lore, not only does Mr. House's ability really just interest me, I love the fact that from the lore, not only is he kind of one of those primary antagonist characters from Fallout New Vegas, but also has appeared in the Fallout show, a brief appearance in the show, and is confirmed to be coming back in season 2. I think a lot of people are going to shift their eyes towards this commander, and a lot of popularity is going to shift to it. So I wanted to kind of get a video out there, especially as a commander that I've always wanted to build, show your love for it. This video is going to act as a soft introduction to the deck. I'm not going to be giving you a whole 99, but I'm going to be giving you the basis. I'm going to go over lands, synergy pieces, you know, what type of cards you want to put in terms of dice rolling, and ultimately the payoffs, your win conditions. So we're going to go over those basic elements as a way to start thinking about the deck, how you want to build the deck. This is going to be more treasure focused, and I'm hoping that at least from a lore perspective, someone that, you know, is trapped away in a room with their machinations, kind of controlling the whole Vegas strip and Fallout, came out of the vault, very secretive, made deals with various like army lords, and just took control of that Vegas strip and created this central zone in the Fallout wasteland. I hope you can use a lot of elements of that, making deals, being sneaky, and using the odds to your favor to really win your commander games in the best way possible. The end result might be the same, but how you get there, that middleman, that transactional piece of the dice randomness, and how you control it is very key in a strategy like this. So let's go over D20s. You don't want to be rolling D6s. Just roll D20s. Contraband Livestock is going to be a great representation of most cards from the D&D sets that just have an effect and also allow you to roll D20s. There's like an ogre that, like, for 4 mana, when it attacks, you roll a D20 as well. This one is 2 mana, exile a creature, great, then you roll a D20. 1 through 9, so 9 out of 20. If you get 9 options out of 20, its controller creates a 4/4 green ox creature token. Now when you roll, if you roll a 4 or higher, then you get a 3/3. If you roll a 6 or higher, you instead create a 3/3 and a treasure token. So still, the majority of the time, you are going to be creating a 3/3 and a treasure, but some amount of that time, that overlap is going to give your opponent a 4/4, which is a better creature than yours, or you might not even get a creature. But for 10 to 19 or 20, so that means 11 out of the possible 20 options, the majority of the time, you are going to be giving your opponent either a 2/2 or a 0/1, and you are creating a 3/3 and or a treasure. So the majority of the time, you are going to be creating a better creature and a treasure token on top of what your opponent is getting, which specifically Contraband Livestock. Not all of the D20 cards are going to be doing this, but I really wanted to highlight how the majority of the time, especially with Mr. House's ability, originally designed for 6-sided dice, you can use D20s to abuse. This is one of the more classical examples in this deck. The high synergy cards, if you went on EDH Rec, literally all the high synergy cards are like just cards that roll D20s. It's just so nonsense. You always want to be playing cards like this, and it just adds another element to your table. It's very similar, or can feel gimmicky, on the lines of the Initiative or Monarch. The Monarch is a little bit better, maybe less gimmicky. I am a fan of Monarch in every Commander game. But when it comes to Dungeons or the Initiative, people may not want to be playing a board game throughout their Commander games, but you know, a little bit of dice rolling is always fun. The next card is going to be Vexing Puzzle Box, a 3-mana mana rock. Whenever you roll one or more dice, put a number of charge counters on Vexing Puzzle Box equal to the result. So if you roll, you know, a d20, you get a 20, you're putting 20 counters on this, which is important for its first ability. Add 1 mana of any color, roll a d20. And so with that type of addition that you get off of this card, great 3-mana mana rock. A lot of controversy around whether or not those are good. You want to go to, you know, 4-mana ramp, is that better? Whatever. In this deck, that free roll, add 1 mana of any color, especially with a 3-color commander, is very great. And then you can remove 100 counters from this Vexing Puzzle Box. So if you're having the nuts, you roll 5 d20s, you get to 100, you can tap, remove the 100 charge counters from it, and then search your library for an artifact, put it onto the battlefield. Free tutor, fantastic. I'm pretty sure if you're tutoring for an artifact in this deck, you are going to find a way to win the game, or at least stabilize past what your opponents may have. So fantastic there. Just a great card all in all, and just so much synergy with this deck, giving you that free d20, that repeatable d20. Maybe you have other ways to untap this card and retap this card. You're going to be rolling d20s multiple times and get to a tutor, and you're just off to the races from there. In the next section, I'm going to go over high synergy pieces. You're making some 3/3s, you're making some treasure tokens off of Mr. House, you're making some tokens in general. What are you doing with those tokens? Firstly, from the Baldur's Gate set, Will, Blade of Frontiers, red and 1 for a 1/1 legendary creature, human warlock. If you would roll 1 or more dice, instead roll that many dice plus 1 and ignore the lowest roll. So for example, with Mr. House, if you were to pay 4 treasures into the activated ability, you'd be rolling 4 d6s. With Will, you would roll 5, and you just ignored the lowest roll. So if you didn't want to, I mean, again, if you roll like a 1 or 2, that roll literally does nothing to you. But if you happen to roll like 5 d6s and all of them are like 10s, you are forced to ignore the 5th 10. Right? So that's something to keep in mind, but it does help kind of smooth out some of your consistency. It's not going to be every time that you activate Mr. House that you're going to be rolling 4 d6s. Sometimes you're just going to roll 1. You need to stop that 3 roll because you got a 16 roll, and you'd rather keep the 16 in that case. When you roll 1 or more dice, put a 1/1 counter on Will, Blade of Frontiers. So if you wanted to build this creature up, remember that you want to roll separate instances of dice, not just like have an ability that just rolls 4 or 5 d6s. So Mr. House's ability doesn't really completely synergize with this. You only get 1/1 counter, but having multiple instances is going to be great just as a synergy piece to increase your consistency. Academy Manufacturer is obviously an auto include in this deck, just a fantastic card in many commander decks, in food decks, in clue decks, but also in treasure token decks. Whenever you create a treasure alongside the Mr. House, you're also going to create a food, you're also going to create a clue, so you naturally have some card draw built in, you naturally have some life gain built in with the Academy Manufacturer, and obviously those artifacts can be used for fabricate costs, they can be used to sacrifice to other abilities. Like, there are so many ways they can use these extra tokens extra for free. Is just a fantastic thing. Academy Manufacturer auto include in this deck. Next one is going to be Zorn. This one is a personal favorite of mine from my Ragavan commander deck. If you create 1 or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. More ramp is great, not only for the Mr. House ability to have more treasured mana to activate, but just an all-around synergy piece. You're going to see that as we go into more cards. This is the type of commander deck that I'm definitely looking to build to be more treasure centric. Let me know in the comment section down below. If we're this far in the video, leave a like on the video if you're liking what you're seeing so far, and let me know if you want me to drop a deck list. I actually have about like 75% of the deck made, about the 75. And the last 25, I'm not really completely sure on. It is one of those decks that I really like. I'm like hyper trying to avoid going on just like the EDH rec stuff and looking at the high synergy stuff, although I did kind of browse through. I'm trying to flex my Scryfall search skills a little bit and think about some of the synergy pieces. So I'm still building it all. Let me know if you want to see a completed video in the comment section down below. I'd happily do a walkthrough of that, but you got to comment down below if you want to see that. Next up is going to be a Rule 0 card, which I think is one of the best Rule 0s out there. If you would roll a die, instead roll 2 of these dice and ignore one of those results. This card inherently does not actually do anything busted. Rolling dice in this deck is a normal thing. This is one of the easiest rule zeros out there. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact. Yes, so you can't create 50 million copies of this without a copy saying, you know, it loses legendary, or you have that artifact that says you ignore the legendary rule. This is definitely, if your playgroup allows you to do it, to maybe have like a mana rock that replaces this, if not, or a synergy piece, something else that rolls dice. But crux of the thumb, very easy rule zero that I want to point out there. I've been trying to make like an active effort in my YouTube shorts, especially to, in my commander videos, include like small short form like rule zero conversations and kind of normalize it for a lot of people, like make them look at what it looks like without maybe necessarily saying that it is a rule zero. And then people come to that realization that that's what, you know, how easy these conversations can be. Get the correct sum. It's pennies. Like behind my camera, you're seeing like, it's like 40 cents, 50 cents, like $1, maybe. Great rule zero card, high synergy piece that you definitely want to include in this deck if your play group lets you play it. Next up is going to be some of the lands. Again, this is a treasure focused type of build. So very easily we are going to be including cards like Treasure Vault, an artifact land, sacrifice Treasure Vault, pay amount of X, create X treasure tokens. That's great. You're probably going to have some treasure win conditions, spoiler alert, that we're going to talk about later. Next up is Fountain Port, just a great value land. Sacrifice a token. You're going to be creating plenty of tokens to draw a card, pay 1 life, create a 1/1 blue fish, and then also 4 mana tap, create a treasure token. If you have 4 mana out, you probably are ramping to some amount of mana. 4 mana is the amount of mana that you'd use for Mr. House. You probably have some haste pieces in there. Maybe you have like an anger to put into your graveyard. You also have 4 mana to create a treasure token just passively. This one has come out of kind of Bloomburrow more recently. So definitely a fantastic addition to a deck like this. And then one of the last cards I want to talk about here is Fomori Vault. Tap, add a colorless mana. So great by default, it's still doing something. And then 3 tap, discard a card. Look at the top X card. So again, if you're playing something like Anger, this is a great way to get it out of your hand. If you have some amount of graveyard synergies, artifact tutors, recursion, a lot of that exists in artifacts. This is a great way to have that outlet. Look at the top X cards of your deck, where X is the number of artifacts you control. If you're creating a bunch of treasure tokens, if you're creating a bunch of stuff of Academy, you could very easily be paying 3 mana. Look at the top 10, 20. Hey, do I even want to say 50 cards in your deck? It's possible. And then put one of those cards in your hand, put the rest of the bottom of your library in any order. There was a version of Goblin Charbelcher playing a card called Recross the Paths. And you look, I believe the card says, you look at the top cards of your deck until you hit a land. That deck has no lands. And so essentially you would rearrange your whole deck. And you rearrange your whole deck, put it back in any order. It was a great way to just set up a win based on what you thought your opponent was going to do. So it was like real, like 5-head type of motions. It was like a it was like, it was like Doomsday at Home type of thing. So you get a rearrange of your whole deck. And so this is what it can sometimes feel like that with this card. Once you get low enough in cards and you have enough artifacts out, like Fomori Vault gives you that big tutor where you can potentially have a ton of mana. You start off with a draw card, and then you're starting to draw out your whole deck with something like a setup with the Fomori Vault. So this card is really cool. It's like a giant Kozilek's command in many ways. Very cool addition to a deck like this. And then finally, Underdark Rift, a card that actually just lets you roll some dice. So 5 mana, you can tap it for colorless, but exile Underdark Rift. Now, I should say you don't want to include too many of these type of lands, remembering that Mr. House CEO is 3 colors. It does not want any type of colorless mana actively, so you need to make sure that the colorless lands that you're including, the cards that produce colorless, have that type of high value. So be very aware of something like that. Exile Underdark Rift, roll a d10, so not a d20, good enough though. Put target artifact, creature, or planeswalker into its owner's library just beneath the top X cards of that library, where X is that result. Activate only as a sorcery. So it's a little bit of removal. Free dice. I shouldn't say free. Just I say free dice roll because anytime you get a dice roll, it feels like it's like a tacked on free ability. Because it's just this synergy piece where they could have just made that card do anything else, but they give you the chance to increase your odds by doing a d20. Just like that removal spell, it could have been 2 mana, exile a creature, they create a token, but they give you that free synergy of adding a d20 in there. So I like that kind of inherent randomness in here. You obviously could be playing cards like Urza's Saga if you're playing more into the artifact theme. You had some tutors, you're going to be building out a bunch of artifacts, creating a bunch of construct tokens. That's more on the expensive side. If you have a coffee, yes, of course, you're playing an artifact deck, you are playing Urza's Saga, sure. But these are kind of the more high synergy lands that I would look to include in a deck like this. Now, finally, the win conditions, the payoffs that I would be playing in a deck like this. Firstly, this one's pretty simple. Crime Novelist, a card that I think like a lot of people got really excited about. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a 1/1 counter on Crime Novelist and add 1 red. So if you're paying 4 mana for your Mr. House CEO, activate ability, roll a bunch of D6 is great, but then you're also getting that mana back. Whenever you sacrifice a treasure, which is an artifact, you are getting that mana back in this. So it's like it's just like a doubling cube almost. You're just doubling up all your mana and you're creating a bunch of 1/1 tokens. You're making this big. It's a great pay. I consider this a payoff because you're making this like a giant creature. And you're also getting your mana back. A lot of mana is a lot of great things. You could consider it a synergy piece. I'm going to consider it a payoff. Mirkwood Bats out of the Lord of the Rings deck. Whenever a creature, whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Very easily can get out of hand. If you have this with an Academy manufacturer out and then you roll a bunch of D6s and then you're creating 3/3s and a treasure, each of those treasure tokens you create literally represents 2 damage. And this has each opponent. Each treasure token represents 6 damage in a 4-player pod. 1/1/1 to each of your other 3 opponents on creation, on sack 1/1/1. Each treasure token is 6 damage. Insane. Mirkwood Bats. You get a sack engine for your creature, then your creatures are starting to like do a bunch of damage as well. Mirkwood Bats, one of the best win conditions in this deck for creating or sacrificing tokens specifically. Don't be sacrificing your Mirkwood Bats. Copies of Mirkwood. Well, actually, if you're creating a copy, it's a token, so I guess that counts as well. Yes, you know what? Create copies of Mirkwood Bats. Let's create copies of Mirkwood Bats. Maybe don't sacrifice them until the end, but you know what I mean. Vihan Goldwaker, in these colors, exactly legendary creature, dwarf, warlock. Other outlaws you control have vigilance, haste, assassins, berserkers, pirates, rogues, warlocks are all outlaws. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have treasures you control become 3/3 construct assassin creature tokens in addition to the other types. So they have haste and vigilance. So the great part about this, your tokens are all now creatures. You can make them indestructible, you can give them boosts, but they have vigilance and haste. So not only can they attack that same turn, but having vigilance gives them that free attack against that opponent that maybe doesn't have any blockers or has very few. And then after combat, you can still tap the artifacts for mana because they're not tapped to attack. Great win condition. Maybe not the most optimal because now you're opening up your treasures to be, removed in different ways and opening up more removal for them. Sure. But if you wanted to build maybe like a go wide version of this type of strategy, this is going to be great. If you have ways to add counters onto all of your artifact creatures, there are plenty of, kind of other cards that do stuff like that, then this is going to be one of those better cards for you. Brazen Dwarf, another one of those damage ones. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, Brazen Dwarf deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is just going to be one of those value pieces. But again, because it says each opponent, it's always relevant because every time you roll a dice, it represents 3 damage in a kind of 4-player pod. This can get out of hand really quick. Honestly, like, even if you roll like 5 dice, that's 15 damage. 5 dice with Brazen Dwarf out. You have to think of it like that. Like this card for 2 mana, if you pay 2 mana to deal 15 damage, would you not pay 2 mana to deal 15 damage? 2 mana to deal 15 damage. You just play out your other spells. You get passive value in your dice. You roll even 5 dice. That's 5 damage to each opponent. 2 mana, 15 damage. Pretty damn good. Just super valuable. And then if you start getting really ridiculous with your life rolls, like this is going to attract removal. It's going to push it away from some of your other pieces. And it's cheap. It's inexpensive. This is not an expensive card. It's a common. It's a 15-cent card. It's a 50-cent card, 25-cent card, whatever it might be. Super, super budget-friendly type of card. I have to, kind of include Revel in Riches in here. You don't need to. Some people are very against this card in terms of how easy it is. But whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. Simple. Literally a card that says I win the game. We went from putting, making creatures super large and doubling your mana, did a little bit of damage, and now literally we just have cards that just say win the game. There are plenty of other creatures out there that, you can tutor based on the amount of artifacts you have. You win if you have a certain amount of artifacts or treasures or whatever. You can include those as well, but you can start to see the variety of different cards that you have in a commander deck such as this. And that is my brief introduction of Mr. House, President and CEO. Let me know what you think about just the cards in general that I brought up down below. Let me know if you want to see a deck list and a full walkthrough of my 99 of this. I haven't like touched it in a while, but I built about 75% of it, had it around in the background. Let me know if you want to see a full walkthrough of that deck, how I've kind of included it there, and then we can go through some example hands. I'd love to walk that for you, especially again, as I mentioned, this isn't some type of ad for it. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm saying that Mr. President, CEO, Mr. House is coming back in season 2 of the Fallout show. So a lot of people are going to be getting their eyes on this. Why don't you hop onto it first, get onto it, get dice rolling first, get people's eyes onto it. And then when they go watch the show, they'll be like, hey, yo, you built that commander deck? That's around this? Let me get into some magic. Hold on. Got some free advertising for the best card game out there. Leave a like on the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And that'll be my little walkthrough of one of my favorite commanders that I have yet to build.